you are in no place to call somebody like AOC a wolf in sheep's clothing when, you know, you do the horseshoe theory stuff all the time.
Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air.
All right, so Kyle Kulinski talked to the Vanguard the other day. They did an interview, which the Vanguard has been using for all sorts of clips. They kind of just teed him up with a bunch of, you know, spicy topics, spilling the tea and whatnot. But they showed him this clip of Cenk Uygur discussing the recent primary where Saikat Chakrabarti got totally stomped by his neoliberal competitor. And this was somebody that there was a lot of controversy over whether or not AOC was going to endorse him. So she didn't, and a lot of people thought she should have, and we'll get into that later. And Cenk Uygur is essentially, you know, fretting over this and blaming her for it, and says some kind of weird things in the process. So I thought that and Kyle's response to it was interesting, as well as just wanting to talk a little bit more about these elections that just happened. So here is Cenk Uygur on the San Francisco primary, as well as Kyle Kulinski following up with a response.
So it's already unconscionable, but I'm trying not to say too much before the election's over. But anyways, so proof's in the pudding. She can try to BS all night long, and if she wants to be a mainstream media darling and like a wolf in sheep's clothing, she's gonna get caught, and not by us. We can say whatever we want, and she can call us the enemy, and she apparently hates us. I don't know, whatever. She's a weirdo. Anyways, but she's not gonna get caught by us. She's gonna get caught by everyone else. We all have eyes and ears. She's got to make a decision. She makes a decision to fight for everyone, great. All I care about is results. If she decides to kiss mainstream media's ass, we're all gonna find out. And if she thinks she can deceive us, all right, let's see how it turns out.
He was basically blaming AOC for Saikat Chakrabarti falling off in the polls, and saying that because she didn't endorse him and because of the fact that he's been touting their work together, you know, this has led to the establishment being able to say, well, he's untrustworthy because even the person he used to work with, AOC, won't endorse him. And Cenk basically, again, took that totally out on AOC and is saying that it's her fault if he loses.
To be fair, I totally agree with the criticism that her not endorsing Saikat is like inexcusable, because I can't imagine, unless there's some bombshell thing that she's hiding from us that we don't know that he did, then it really strikes me as unfathomable to not endorse him, especially given who his opponents are. And I really think it has to do with the fact that, you know, Mama Bear was like, look, he was a dick to all these other people in the Democratic caucus, and we all hate him. So if you support him, that's you spitting in all of the eyes of the people who you work with. And so that's going to cause deeper problems for you. And I think that was enough to make her fall in line. So I actually agree on the substance of saying that it's inexcusable not to endorse Saikat. I had problems with Saikat. I thought he threw Cenk under the bus too quickly when those old blog posts came out.
Speaking of Cenk, yeah.
me and Saikat had issues over that. And I even said to AOC at one point, I was like, I don't trust this Saikat motherfucker, because he instantly threw Cenk under the bus as soon as those blog posts came out. And I literally said that to AOC back when we had the Justice Democrats.
Was she in favor of getting Cenk out of the way too?
No, she was very,
wow.
I feel like she was very rational, very level-headed at the time. And she came to me and said, like, we have a problem. So my point is, even I had problems with Saikat, but in a million fucking years, I'm going to endorse him every single time over all of his disgusting establishment opponents. So she definitely should endorse Saikat. But having said that, I think your broader point is correct here, that you are in no place to call somebody like AOC a wolf in sheep's clothing when, you know, you do the horseshoe theory stuff all the time. And like, there's a lot of videos that are like, Tucker Carlson destroys this person or that person, or MTG does this or that. And it's like, I'm sorry, but the way I look at politics now is I look at it a lot like math, right? And it's like, all right, how often is this person actually with me? And then you look at it with somebody like AOC, it's like, what, 95% of the time she votes the way I'd want her to vote? And then you look at somebody like MTG and it's like, oh, 90% of the time she votes the wrong way. Yeah. And so it's like, why would the emphasis be on like, look at these people and how great they are, versus your ally who's actually with you most of the time, and then when something you don't agree with happens, you're going to hype that up and make that to be the bigger deal? It just strikes me as, you know, it's a crisis of bad emphasis, in my opinion. and it leads people down a bad path. It's how we've had, like, the Jimmy Dore circa 2018 type issues, where it's like, oh, you just like lost your mind.
You think Cenk would support Tucker over AOC if they both run in 2028?
That's a question you'd have to ask him, brother. Yeah. But the fact that I can't snap answer, no, of course not, is worrying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that worrying? The fact that I can't go, oh, absolutely he wouldn't do that. Isn't that worrying? Because that's worrying to me.
Okay, so I want to get into all the Tucker Carlson stuff, etc., a little bit later, but just to touch on the Saikat thing. So this was the guy who was running as the left flank candidate in the San Francisco primary for Congress in the 11th district. So he used to work with AOC, was part of the campaign, and so a lot of people kind of expected that she would endorse him, and then she didn't very conspicuously, and so that led to some ripples. Now in this election, he did very bad, did not get anywhere near the amount of votes where it seems to me that an endorsement from AOC would have even made a difference. Now some people could disagree on that, I'm sure, and say that if he had gotten that endorsement, it would have been like a huge core of support that he didn't have without it. But it seems to me that if he isn't able to have that type of solid support enough to get, 20% of the vote, then it just seems like there's a problem with that candidate and their strategy and their ground game. There are other dynamics at play here, like the ballot being split, which is what seems to be happening in other races in California as well. But, some of the speculation I saw was that AOC tends to ask people for ground game. In other words, a roadmap for how someone plans to win and evidence that they're serious and that their campaign has their head on straight about how to get there. It seems to me that this result would reflect that they didn't have that, because they should, even if they didn't have winning support, they should have had enough that they could have done better numbers than this. This seems to be an enormous underperformance from the amount of popularity that Saikat has gotten online amongst, the usual left flank type of audiences, which hasn't really been the trend in other cases with progressives in these primaries. Being online and having a presence among the online left does seem to give most candidates at least a little bit of a boost. So seems like internally there must have been something undercutting Saikat here, which may be the reason that AOC chose not to endorse him. Now Cenk deciding that her doing that is some, fundamental betrayal, I guess, in the sense of truly wanting someone like him to win that race instead of the, neoliberal Scott Wiener. I can understand that disappointment, but it's an example, as they said, of directing your anger in the wrong place. And I think certain commentators will do that. They will direct people's anger towards an elected official or whatever, and you can really juice that. But if you're more focused on creating sort of a dramatic narrative or talking point surrounding an elected official rather than an actual point of leverage, an actual way to pressure them, ultimately that's what leads people astray and leads to these wonky balancing systems in terms of who you actually think is on your side. And so you get these weird lopsided conversations about people like Tucker Carlson or Marjorie Taylor Greene, where because those people are making a spectacle of themselves and are making themselves visible, you don't just have people saying, hey, they're making themselves more visible than we are, and that's a problem. We should be doing that times 10. They're saying, hey, maybe these people aren't so bad. Maybe the Tucker Carlsons and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, specifically white nationalists, people who have meaningfully built the white nationalist project, not just your average anti-Trump Republican or whatever. And if you're more favorable towards that type of dissent from the right, that is an argument that I've heard from some people, that because they are meaningfully burning bridges with the powerful people in their party that are doing these bad things, that's showing more principle than we've seen from people who stuck it out during the Biden administration and said they're tirelessly working for a ceasefire, etc. That's a phrase that has stuck to AOC, maybe somewhat inorganically. But the other side of that is that by leaving power, Marjorie Taylor Greene has made herself ineffective. She has no effect on these issues and cannot vote against war like Thomas Massey can, or the Epstein files. And it's questionable whether this, trail of glory that she blazed on the way out even had any meaningful effect on Epstein or whatever. She got herself in the news about it a lot and has propped her name up a lot. Rebranded as somebody who has empathy rather than this sort of psycho soccer mom type of brand that she had before. And as far as Tucker Carlson goes, I think that already he is doing the work of disproving the people who want to prop him up. And I think, at this point, Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian has propped up Tucker Carlson as, somebody who is ideologically level, or, leveling valid criticisms of Israel, showing some semblance of leadership, and possibly somebody to ally with. Both of them have spoken with Tucker Carlson on his program and shown some warm relations there. And you see people like Megyn Kelly coming out and saying, oh, there's this emerging left-right alliance, etc. And the thing about it is, these are people who are making no concessions at all. And I think at the turn of this last election, presidential election, Cenk Uygur decided that the direction he was going to go with TYT was to, make concessions on behalf of the left, and on behalf of his position at least, to try to pick up some of the lost ground to the right. And so in the process, Tucker Carlson has been able to gain some credibility on the back of this Gaza issue, while simultaneously conceding nothing of the right-wing beliefs that he brings to the table. And that does matter when you're talking about the sort of mixture of the audience and the mixture of the cause. You're not talking about legislation, like let's get this bill through, war powers, Epstein files, etc. Ro Khanna, as of right now, is the authority on the left of how to do that sort of thing. He had this theory for a long time, and he took shit for it as well. This theory of, being willing to collaborate with the right, or the tech bros in San Francisco. But he was able to get some real meaningful things done by working with individuals in the caucus. But on the outside, you're talking a little bit more about like a dialectical conversation, like you're talking to someone and meeting in the middle. And so if the person that you're talking to is a known white nationalist, the kind of white nationalist that has like insidiously snuck their ideology into all kinds of different content and commentary over the years. And so people that have pointed that out are now kind of allowing that same exact white nationalism back in the door. Because when it comes to Tucker Carlson, he's still doing the exact same project. When you go look, he has more visibility now than he's had since he left Fox News. And now that he's back at that point, he is doing almost word for word the exact type of commentary and like editorializing that he was doing back then. And it's all surrounding this white nationalism idea. And so the lack of having to rethink their worldview, to say, okay, I'm going to change my mind about Trump. He duped me. He tricked me. He scammed me. That's great. But in order to make any type of collaboration successful, in terms of I'm going to convert some of the people who follow you, I'm going to talk to them, have a good faith exchange with you that might change some of their minds. The only way that that's useful as a sort of buddy-buddy type of exercise and not a combative debate type of exercise is if you're talking to somebody who's willing to rethink their worldview a little bit, because they are the ones who created this situation. And it's specifically their ideology that did it. Donald Trump was elected on the back of the ideology of people like Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, Tim Dillon, Joe Rogan. Everything that they've been saying for the last several years is what Trump ran on. And it's a message that they popularized and mainstreamed. And so I think that this temptation to collaborate with the right when it comes to outside of TYT, but people who might be feeling that way out there. Brianna Joy Gray has also recently made some comments about this, about how she feels like she knows a lot of people that would rather vote for Tucker Carlson than AOC, which is insane. People that consider themselves on the left that would rather vote for Tucker Carlson over AOC. So at best, you could say that that's because Tucker Carlson is saying the things that those people agree with the most at the moment. But also, at best, it's saying that they have the attention of a goldfish and don't even have the perception to pay attention to the other things that Tucker Carlson is saying at this very moment. So, that's kind of like blinking red light to me, her saying that. I was, pretty favorable, charitable to her in her debate that she did with ContraPoints, which obviously, maybe wasn't deserved. I think she makes some good points sometimes, but has a terrible overall analysis. And that's a perfect example. Although she wasn't saying, I would vote for Tucker Carlson over others, she was pointing to this dynamic that a lot of people on the left would. And I don't know that that's true. I think you have prominent voices who are saying things like that. And I think amongst the broader populace that isn't necessarily political, you might have this general feeling of like sympathy toward Palestine, anger at Israel, and also being vaguely aware of Tucker Carlson because he's one of the loudest voices on this subject and is being amplified by the media, etc., which is part of the point that Brianna Joy Gray was making, to be fair. So all of that is to say that, people like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene have advanced in their careers by playing off of people's emotions, specifically playing off of the type of emotions that culminate in, fascist violence, racism, skepticism about neighbors, and paranoia about like eradication of the white race. This is something that they have thrived on. So by taking people's anger at the electoral system and certain electoral figures and channeling it in a way that is either pumping up these insidious figures on the right or encouraging people to kind of destroy any momentum that the opposition to those right-wing figures has. That is, I think, a temptation that comes, amongst just average people out there. It comes from this frustration that there is no meaningful structure on the left within the Democrats that can do anything. And so when somebody arises that's prominent, that gives you the sense that they would do something with power if they had it, that becomes attractive to people in the absence of the opposite. But it's an abdication on the part of Cenk Uygur and TYT to take people's anger at that and direct it away from anything productive. And directing anger at AOC is one thing, but doing it in this way that encourages people to uphold Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson as better alternatives. Or this thing he said about how she's weird and she's such a weirdo. It's just odd. It seems personal. And of course, they hate us, apparently. Trying to frame it that way to make himself more of the center of this, to make it so that like his opposition is the reason that she ultimately is not aligned with this project. But really what it seems to me is that if she had endorsed Saikat, she would have been endorsing a losing candidate. And she seems to have caught wind of that. So, people can disagree with that, I'm sure. And again, I understand the frustration at certain candidates not winning in this election, but being diligent about how we channel that emotion so that we can create some better outcomes in the future is crucial. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would rather channel people's emotion in less productive directions. And, the people like Tucker Carlson are there ready to take advantage of that. They are professionals at taking advantage of people's lack of discernment. So helping them with that project is like a permanently damaging thing to do. And I'd be perfectly happy to hear some concessions from them on the damaging worldview that they have that has led to Donald Trump. But I'm not hearing that. So I don't really see any reason to trust them.